Back in Arizona as we get set for racing here for the Girls Championship race to close out the action in 2023. Top talent in the region, 5 states represented, all coming down to Arizona. And Tom, that, again, affords us that opportunity, that reminder for folks to appreciate this moment of opportunity for these athletes. We have state champions from all these different regions. Now when you look left, you look right. And even Danny Simmons had to break away from a talented field. You don't come in here as necessarily the prohibitive favorite, even if you've been dominant in your respective state all season long.
And the best example of that is Gianna Romer, 8th grader from the ABQ Golden Eagles in El Dorado, New Mexico. She's undefeated in 4 races this year. She won the New Mexico 5A cross-country championships by 2 minutes, 4 seconds. So what's a runner like Gianna Romer going to do in a race like this, where before she's used to just running and hiding from everybody? It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this young 8th grader handles this type of race. Another person I'd like to mention, Paul, before the start, Academy Cross Country, the club, has, of course, won the Colorado State 5A championships. They went 2-3-6 in their state meet, and Bethany Mahalik, who could ostensibly be the favorite in this race, she was the number 3 runner on the team. Number 3 runner, Tessa Walter and Mariah Hook, a freshman, finished 2nd and 3rd in that race.
Final moments of reflection here in Arizona before we get to the racing. Again, the top 2 teams at the conclusion of this race, and the top 5 individuals not part of one of those qualifying teams will advance automatically with invitations to Nike Cross National. Still some at-large bids, a possibility for both individuals for the first time in a few years, and the standard 4 additional at-large teams to be out of the groups that finished 3 and 4 in their respective divisions. Slightly bigger group on the girls' championship side, Tom, than the boys, and they still all have to traverse through. You can see the muck in front of them, and have to tell them there's more muck on the course, and probably muckier than it was when the boys towed the line just about a half hour ago.
Yeah, you're right. Every race gets muckier and muckier. It is going to be interesting to see the strategy that's going to be used in this race, because you really have to find your line on this course with all of the goop. One thing I wanted to point out, Paul, on the Lone Peak team that's kind of said, hey, we're going to go for the at-large berth. We're going to kind of give it up because we don't have our number 1 runner, Andy Igart. But what they do have is 3 Bybes and 2 Nilsons among their top 7 runners. So there is definitely a family factor there for that Lone Peak team. Meanwhile, for real training, aside from Addison Ritzenhein, who is very experienced even as just a sophomore, Olivia Alessandrini, Sarah Perkins, they were 3rd and 4th in their state meets. And then the Proc sisters, who Eric Bull spoke with in the pregame show, Mia was 6th and Anna was 10th. They're very, very deep. The spread between their 2nd and 5th runners, just 22 seconds. And then, of course, they have Ritzenhein at the very top of the pack, or expected to be at the very top of the pack in this race.
Scheduled start time for this race was at 27 minutes after the hour, so they're in position, but likely giving them a few more moments. We saw the boys got one last run out. We'll see if the girls have the same opportunity here in a moment. But been great racing all morning long. It started early for you, Tom, with that Citizens 5K, but you saw a lot of talent on the course, and that's, again, been one of the highlights to Nike Cross Regionals here in 2023. Record entries across the board.
And when you have Colorado and Utah in your region, and they benefit from that altitude that they have in their respective states, you're always going to have, from those fertile 2 states, some of the best teams in the country. The course record, Paul, 16:23:40. Again, given the footing, it may not be at all in jeopardy. That was set by Katie Rainsberger back in 2015.
Though you say that, and we witnessed Simmons almost break the course record. So depending on the fitness and the way that these athletes attack the course, anything could possibly happen here over the course of the next 5,000 meters. Colorado has sent 26 teams over the years to Nike Cross Nationals. Utah has sent 11, Arizona 5, New Mexico 2, And Nevada has never qualified a team out of this region for Nike Cross Nationals. Could it be a possibility today? We're about to find out here as the girls have their final moments before this race unfolds.
67 degrees right now, so it's very comfortable for a 5K. You can see, Paul, in the flag in the distance, there is some wind on this course. So between the wind and the footing, if I were a potential winner of this race, I'd want to hang back a little bit just to make sure. Not too far back because you want to get your line. You don't want to get caught in the mud, but maybe not actually lead during the early portions of this race.
There is a race within the race, which is that first, call it first 400 meters as you get across this wide open expanse of starting line into the chute that carries you out onto this golf course. And you know, the one advantage we have with this high above drone camera footage is you can see what the athletes are dealing with and trying to find the driest and safest line through this deteriorating race course, which was redesigned overnight because of the impending rain and also some conditions that were already out there on the course. And a reminder, because of those conditions, no gator with the leaders here, so we'll be doing our best to identify the athletes from high above. Appreciate your patience and understanding with that. We will have 1 mile and 2 mile splits that will afford us the opportunity to identify those athletes and maybe more importantly, identify all the athletes in their positions and those in progress team scores in the race to be among the top 2 at the end of this Nike Cross Regional.
Paul, at 8072 with the sunglasses and the very distinctive pink shorts, that's Ella Hagen. And she's somebody that we absolutely expect to be in that lead pack. She was the first sophomore finisher at NXR last year, finishing 7th. And she won the Colorado 4A Cross Country Championships in 2022, lost to Addison Ritzenhein this year.
So they're giving the girls one last run up. They'll be back to the start line. We'll get set for racing here. Reminder, our Nike Cross Regional schedule rolls on. Tomorrow we'll be in North Carolina for the call of the Southeast region. And then after the turkey holiday, after you've woken up from your L-tryptophan nap, you can join us on Saturday for a doubleheader from New York, Wappinger Falls, as we'll have both the Northeast and the New York regions to conclude our regional live coverage here on runnerspace.com. The California regions will be chosen out of the performances we see at the CIF champs, and then those teams and the at-larges will be winging their way to the Pacific Northwest in early December, first weekend of December for Nike Cross Nationals this year in 2023. Glendevere Golf Course, the host once again. This is the only region that actually has a golf course set up, so at least for these athletes, a little bit of familiarity when they get to the east side of Portland. But now they toe the line. The racing is underway in Arizona to crown a champion in 2023 at Nike Cross Regionals Southwest. So the athletes out on the course here, and the clock will populate the upper left side of your screen. That's where you'll see the data unfold as well at that 1 mile and 2 mile mark. But we settle in for the early going here. As, you know, the last couple of regions, Tom, we saw Rachel Forsyth in the Midwest absolutely destroy the field. And then in the South region earlier today, it was Elizabeth Leachman who kind of did the same thing here in the early going, at least in Arizona. A little bit more of a cautious approach. And perhaps, Tom, the conditions warrant that.
Most definitely. Plus, Paul, without Agard and without Jane Hedengren, this is a very, very well-balanced field of top-flight runners. So we're not going to see the runaway, I don't think, in this race. It would be very, very surprising, even though you have the runners ranked number 7, 9, 12, and 15 in the U.S., and that just goes to show that there should be a pretty good race here amongst at least those 4 and a couple of others as well.
Rosalind
I see Addison
Stowe.
Ritzenhein Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. I see Addison Ritzenheim. She's wearing the reel. You'll see her here momentarily. She's there in the reel jersey, moving up on the inside of that course.
Great natural sound as that large group of runners comes across in front of our down low camera position. A chance to ID some of those athletes early on, as Tom did, and it was in the midst of mentioning that was Rosalind Stowe of Carbon High, a sophomore who was out to the early lead. Saw an early lead by a New Mexico high school athlete in the boys race, but in this case, the lead pack staying with Stowe as they work their way down one of these beautiful fairways in Arizona. The sun is finally out after the rain descended on the region in the early going. That's why the conditions are what they are. And there are portions of the course, Tom, where it does look like there has not been a lot of damage. And then every once in a while they run into these pockets. And, it's interesting to watch this group that, if you're about 10 rows back, that this course comes at you pretty fast. And you can't be confident that you're going to know exactly what you're going to run into because you may be blocked from seeing it.
That's very fair and a very astute point that you make there. So, ideally, with it being windy and a little bit muddy, as you're seeing another bad patch over here, you want to be near the front, but you definitely want to be able to see and be able to take your line because, as you pointed out, you could slip and slide and not expect it. And so it's very critical to be able to see where the heck you're going on a day like this.
Fun for the neighboring homes here to have a sporting event come right behind their backyard here on a beautiful November day in Arizona, settling in for the holiday week to come. The racing continues for us tomorrow with the Southeast region, New York, and the Northeast regions coming your way on runnerspace.com next Saturday. This lead group still numbers in the few dozen as they are using every yard of this course side to side to try to find room to run. And this portion coming up here, Tom, where they work their way around the water, not only is it tough to find some solid footing, but coming through the water, you'll see at the apex of the water feature at the very top of your screen is a little bit of a culvert that, again, you have to maneuver and prepare for. And just worry about some of those folks that are 5-6 deep and not knowing that that's going to be coming at them as quickly as it will.
And this is where experience is so important. And of the top runners, most of them are experienced. Ritzenheim, even though she's only a sophomore, given her pedigree and her family and the number of years she competed on the junior circuit, she knows her way around, tough situations like this. But this is somewhat, I would almost even say unprecedented that we are almost 5 minutes into this race and there's about 30 people in the lead pack. That is a bit unusual, Paul.
So they're closing in on the 1 mile mark as we'll get our first chance to set this order here. Is our gator not able to be out on the course, so we're relying on these pictures from high above. And for any of you who follow these girls week in and week out, maybe be easier to identify than it is for Tom and I, but we'll reset the order here momentarily as the crowd gets over there, and that tent marks that 1 mile mark in the race, and that's where we'll pick up some of the details of this race as they work their way through.
Very
like Tessa
tactical
Walter.
Race. I was just going to say, Paul, a very tactical race. We're running about 17:10 pace, and that's why you see so many in the lead group. And Tessa Walter, as you mentioned, from the Academy XC, she is the finished second at her Colorado State 5A championships. No surprise, she's up there. She was second to Rosie Mucharski, who's also in this race. She was 19th. Tessa Walter was last year at the NXR Southwest, 39th at the NXN Nationals. And then Ella Hagen, Addison Ritzenheim, Peyton Meineke, Isabella Laurie. Again, the leaderboard, very familiar to us that have been doing these races for a number of years.
And as it now starts to populate on the upper part of your screen, the 1 mile split affords us the opportunity to see the team race in real time. And again, all the unattached athletes, as they come across that timing mat, have to be removed from the standings. And then all the team racers are rescored based on those placing. That's why those scores change in a dynamic fashion, but affords you the opportunity to kind of see where things are at in academy and real training right now. The two out there in the first and second positions, Lone Peak in third and Vista Nation in fourth. We saw on the boys' side, it seemed like Harriman was not in the upper part of the team standings early on, used the back half of the race in trying to move up in the standings. Perhaps an American Fork that we saw a little bit further down there might be having the same thought process coming into this girls' race.
Well, Paul, the number 1, 2, and 3 teams in the country are number 1, 2, and 3 right now. I think the main thing to watch really is Lone Peak, because they're going to try to get that at-large berth without Andy Agard, who won this race last year. They have a 9-point bulge over Vista Nation. We got to watch that 3-4 very carefully. Meanwhile, at the top, well, it's 10-point lead for Academy XC over Real Training. Well, they are the number 1 and 2 ranked teams, so that's pretty predictable. There are a couple of names that I want to bring up on the leaderboard here. Gianna Rommers, that 8th grader from New Mexico. She's currently in 13th. Rosie Mucharski, who we just mentioned, she's in 16th. Avalon Meekum in 17th for American Fork. But Bethany Mahalik kind of for Academy in 21st, kind of laying back a little bit. Now the question is she going to make her way through the pack or not? And she's a big game hunter, Paul, so I'm expecting that she'll bring her A game to this race.
And I think if she's in that sort of early 20 placings, Tom, she may very well still be part of this lead group of runners here, as again, they work their way through the second mile of the race.
So if we're looking at this as being a kicker's race, Paul, the fastest woman in the field is Rosie Mucharski. She's a 2:09 800 runner, and then a 2:11 800 runner is Isabel Alori. So if this does come down to a kick, which unless somebody does something in a quick fashion, it may just happen that way. You might want to look at those two as certainly having the best leg speed of any two runners in the field.
At that 1 mile mark, we had 34 runners within 4 seconds of the lead, but from the view high above now, you can see that number has dwindled as a few of that group in the lead pack have fallen out of the back here as the pace continues to get pushed in the front of the pack. Over 9 minutes elapsed here in this girls' championship race at Nike Cross Regionals Southwest.
This could be a negative split mile, Paul, because as I said, the first mile, I don't know if it's fair to call it pedestrian, but it certainly was not a fast mile, considering about 17:10 pace, and the course record is 16:23. But I love slow races because those tactical slow races give you memorable finishes, and I have a feeling we're going to have one of those memorable finishes here.
Well, for just context, Leachman, who won in the South region, did the first mile in 5:01, so just kind of puts perspective here on kind of how the pacing of this race has unfolded. Over 10 minutes now into the race, and they're going to close in on that second mile split tent, say that 5 times fast, here shortly as they're going to work their way down this long fairway stretch and going to start to see a little bit of separation from these top girl athletes as they all try to find some safe room to run. And right now, perhaps the safest, and this is something that is, kind of a teachable moment for those who are still in their racing careers, is sometimes the best place to be is as far to the edge of the race course as you can, because that may be where some of the ground is still stable.
That's absolutely true, either on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side. You see Ella Hagen there in the pink shorts. She's taking the left-hand side line, and it seems to be working for her. I haven't seen any disruption in her rhythm whatsoever. And then you have an athlete there who in the red who's taking the outside line there. But through 2 miles, Addison Ritzenheim there in the middle, she leads Alori, Gianna Romer, who is that 8th grader from New Mexico, and Ella Hagen, who I just mentioned. Meanwhile, Paul, Bethany Mahalik in the lead group. She moved up 16 spots in the last mile, the big game hunter.
Well, good strategy for her to kind of stay with that lead group, but also the presence of mind to notice when things were beginning to split even more. It dwindled quickly from that group that we saw. Again, it was 30 plus within 4 seconds of the lead, but now just 9 girls within 4 seconds of the lead, and that's starting to dwindle as well as this lead group of 5 starts to wind it up for this last mile to home for a Nike Cross Regional Championship. Ritzenheim, Alori, Raymer, Hagen, and Mahalik.
Got to be impressed with the 8th grader mixing it up with this veteran contingent. And of those runners, my money's on Alori with that 2:11.800 speed. She looks like she could be best positioned down the straightaway here. And Mahalik just kind of keeps moving up there, Paul. Right in the mix of things. That's what veteran experience brings you. That's what being a big game hunter is. Somebody that knows when to bring it in the big moments.
And keep an eye on that dynamic scoring up above. Great battle between Real Training and Academy for that first and second position in the team race. Destination Lone Peak and American Fork has moved up now into the top 5.
And Lone Peak's got to really hustle it up because they wanted to get in on this wild card entry, and it's going to be tough. They were going to rest Andy Agard and hope that she could be fit for the championships in 2 weeks. But this is terrific racing, Paul. We got 5 right there, right in the midst of it. Hagen in the pink in 5th still has a shot at it. They're all in there. They all have a shot at it. Ritzenheim hugging the inside there. She looks very comfortable. She's in there about 3rd place or so. Mahalik right there in the middle in the white.
Having to maneuver around that turn, but now it's straightaway racing here for a while. This is kind of the point in the race where we saw Danny Simmons a few minutes ago kind of start to take control. Right now, it's still a group of 5 setting up what could be a fabulous finish here in Arizona.
Absolutely, and I'm surprised that nobody has broken back from this group of 5, but there again, you have 5 of the very, very best runners in the country, and that 8th grader, Gianna Romer, is really holding her own amongst these veterans. This young lady that won her state meet by 2 minutes, undefeated in 4 races this year, but has never faced this level of competition. She's got a lot of moxie.
Another swift turn, and now they'll afford themselves that opportunity to see where the rest of the field is as they start to head for the finish line. Another battle through some of the muck here on this rain-soaked golf course. The crowd anticipating the finish now.
So again, Alori with that 2:11 speed has got to be kind of the favorite now as we get closer and closer to the finish. We're about 2 minutes away from this finish, if not a little bit less. And you got to start thinking about your strategy at this point, Paul. When am I going to make my move? If I want to win this race, when do I do it? When do I make that move? Each of these runners knows their own strengths. So they're going to have to figure this thing out as to, okay, if I'm going to go for this win, when do I really make my surge?
And Tom, just like we see at Glendoveer every December, this course just a little bit of an uphill within a few strides of that finish line that could be one of those definitive points, but albeit a late one to make a strategic decision for a championship. Now beginning to see a trio emerge from the pack of 5 here as the crowd begins to bring them home.
It's Alori, Romer, and Mahalik as Ritzenheim has dropped back, and Ella Hagen has dropped back. So it's these 3, Alori, Romer, and Mahalik, that the winner is going to come from, Paul. Ritzenheim trying gamely to get back with the top 3, but I think it's going to be awfully tough. And that 8th grader is just... That 8th grader, Paul, she is just hanging so tough in there. Just an amazing race, and this is a bad part of the course.
Well, and smart move by her. She stayed to the outside, and Alori had to go into the middle and start to hit the muck. Here is a big turn in the race as they begin to head towards the finish line. Look at this crowd embracing this fabulous finish to the line.
So
Can
Romer
an
on the
eighth-grader
left.
take down the field against Alori? Toe-to-toe to the line. And it will be an eighth grader winning Nike Cross Regional Southwest. Gianna Raymer takes the title, and she is beside herself taking down this field here in Arizona.
Not only that, but a brilliant race strategy. Where does this eighth grader come up with such a brilliant race strategy? She knew when to go. She had a 2:11 half-miler on her tail, and yet she still takes the win. And that was really an impressive race for her. As Alori, nothing to be ashamed about. Ritzenheim, Mahalik, Hagen, all these big names in the top 5. And we'll be watching very carefully also to see how this team battle shakes out, because it's real close between Academy and Real. There was just 4 points separating them at the 2-mile mark.
We've been talking about that top 5 in their order of finish. You see there, Raymer, Alori, Ritzenheim, Mahalik, and Hagen. And then Lily Alder, the sophomore, gets in for 6th position. So we had sophomores in Ritzenheim and Alder in the top 6, along with the 8th grader who wins it all. Another sophomore back in 8th position, Peyton Meineke. And another sophomore in 9th, Claire Goberson. Youth being served here in bunches as they cross the finish line.
Oh, excuse me, Paul. It's a bit surprising because you would think the veterans, having faced a lot of different challenges in their careers, would have been the one to really come forward in a race like this, but you can't keep talent down. Now, Real Training has a 10-point bulge right now over Academy. Real Training, the number 2 ranked team in the country. Academy number 1. Real Training led by Ritzenheim's 3rd place finish. Olivia Alessandrini's 11th place finish. Mia Prock, one of the Prock sisters, really nice race. She finished 19th. That is super, super impressive for her. She was 6th at her state meet. She was the 3rd runner for them at the state meet. And then Real Training, Sarah Perkins, 24. They really packed them in well. Caden Justice, 26. And for good measure, the sister, Anna Prock, in 27th.
A mixture of celebration and exhaustion at the finish line. As they always say, finish on empty at Nike Cross Regionals. And for many of these athletes, the conclusion of their championship season. And how about the celebration for the middle schooler? Gianna Raymer, who's got an older sister who performed well at the Junior Olympics in Eugene earlier this summer. So there is no secret that this young girl is the next great thing to come out of this region. I mean, you think about, some of the other, like Lauren Ping, can remember, was running in Nike Cross Regionals as an 8th grader. And we would always be impressed when, she would finish competitively in the race. But by no measure, I mean, there was obviously a reason that we put her in the list of favorites, but when you sort of look at it on paper and the field that she was up against, not sure she would have been the one that most reasonable followers of high school cross country would have said would have won this one in the fashion that she did.
But let's go back to your very first point when they were at the starting line. You're the best in your state, or you're the best in your district, or whatever, and this is a classic case of that. Raymer had not run against any of these young ladies before, so it was hard to really evaluate just how well she would perform. She delivered in spades today. Really, really impressive. And the racing strategy really, really sound and smart, which is good coaching. Very good coaching. And Paul, it looks like Real Training, number 2 in the nation, is going to come away with the win here over the number 1 team in the nation, 206 out of the 224 completed. I'm going to be like Steve Korniacki, and I'm going to call it for Real Training to win this.
Well, it would take a little bit of a argument with the at-large committee to get Lone Peak in the mix, though they would take in consideration the strength of that team if they add back last year's winner, Agard, who sat out this one because of a slight injury that she picked up at the state championship meet. But a great view from high above this crowd here. My apologies in advance to the golf course superintendent and his staff who gave us the privilege of being out on this course today, but they'll have to be putting in some work to get some of those stretches alongside those beautiful green fairways back into playing shape over the next few days. Waiting to hear from Gianna Raymer here shortly, as we'll also try to hear from the winning team to wrap up our championship coverage from this Saturday in November. Still more action to come tomorrow, as we'll be in the Southeast region in North Carolina, and then on into next weekend's coverage. Both races on Saturday, both races in New York, with the New York and the Northeast region. And looking forward, Tom, to our call coming up in just a couple of weeks' time of Nike Cross Nationals. No shortage of storylines already to prepare for, and many others to unfold here over the next 3 regions to come.
You're absolutely right. Lone Peak strategy, as we mentioned at the very beginning, let's see if we can get through this, get that wild card entry into the final. The best laid plans of Mice and Men gang after Glade, but I still say they should get in. They were just 15 points behind Vista Nation. Vista Nation, how about their come-through performance? Claire Giberson in 9th, the 10th grader, and then followed immediately by Peyton Adams in 10th, the 11th grader. And that set the tone for the Vista Nation performance, which brought in Juliet Frum, another 11th grader, in 21st place.
Well, getting her first major test of championship racing, the New Mexico 5A champion on the left side of your screen, Gianna Raymer, up against Isabel Olori, a senior with a whole lot of experience. The Colorado 3A state champion the last 2 years did not have enough in the tank. And an 8th grader reigns over the Southwest region in 2023. So we've had dominant performances on the girls' side, like we saw in the Midwest and in the South. A surprise performance here in the Southwest region, and still 3 more regions to come in the Southeast, the Northeast, and in New York.
Paul, you do the biggest meets in the world, every year. I don't do as many of those, but I have to say that I always look forward to these NXRs and NXNs because it's championship level racing at its finest, and how you cannot be inspired by what these athletes do is just amazing.
And how can you not be inspired by what we just witnessed from the